or how Venezuela has gone from being one of the richest countries in the world to one of the poorest countries in the world. Would it have happened naturally? Is this something that just naturally would have happened as a consequence of a failed socialist economic policies that have been put in place by both Maduro and Chavez that have created, if nothing else, a historic brain drain in Venezuela? Or was it hastened, or maybe even caused by the destabilizing pressure that was applied by the United States policies? So to answer that question, I want to bring in somebody who knows an awful lot about this. Professor Miguel Tinker Salas. He has written countless books on Venezuela, including what everyone needs to know, the enduring legacy, oil, culture, and society. Professor, I'm so glad you're here with us. Let's start with this. What was it, you heard my question, what was it that caused these really catastrophic conditions?
Well, I think we have to go back to the history of Venezuela, go back to the discovery of oil, go back to understand that Venezuela by 1935 had become the world's leading exporter of oil. At the same time, it became a net importer of food, which meant that the majority of Venezuela's products it consumed were being imported from abroad, that agriculture was falling by the wayside, that there wasn't an effort to create industries, that there wasn't an effort to create self-sufficiency, and that government after government built up a client-patron relationship utilizing oil resources that increasingly were dispersed among the population, but with a concentration among middle and upper classes. In other words, even during the 1980s and 1970s, when there's a boom period in Venezuela, we're talking about continuous poverty. We're talking about, in some cases in the 1990s, 50 to 60% of the population living in poverty. So that oil did not uplift the entire nation. Then we have the rise of Hugo Chavez, who attempts to take the oil industry in another direction, to utilize it to create a series of social programs to address the needs of the population, including poverty, housing, health, education. That means that much of the money was now being taken from the industry and distributed among a series of social programs, many of them that were duplicating efforts, etc. The bureaucracy was growing, the state was growing, and increasingly there was very little money plowed back into investment in the industry itself. That began to sow the seeds of some of the problems that the industry faced. A series of opposition protests, the coup, as you said, the brain drain, were all factors then in creating conditions that eventually would lead to further dependence on oil rather than less dependence on oil.
And it's interesting you say that, because what I hear you saying is that some of the conditions that were set up that got us to where we are today were caused by pre-Chavez leaders, the oligarchical leaders of the country that tended to think more of the rich and somewhat ignored the poor, let's face it. Chavez himself, because of the corruption that was caused, the brain drain that was caused by some of his policies. So let's just assume that that's the case. Let's take it a step further now, because this is where it gets interesting. So let's say because Maduro followed Chavez, who did not have good policies, let's get Maduro out of there. Let's suppose the United States gets what it wants. Maduro's out. What's to say this next guy, Guaido, is going to be any better? Or do you think he will be?
Well, I think that's the big quandary that both the opposition and the government are facing. Neither one is debating the real economic challenges the country faces. Neither one is proposing an alternative to a continued dependence on oil. And oil, in part, is what got the country into the quandary that it is today. So I think that as long as we keep talking about oil as the engine that's going to transform Venezuela, without understanding that the country needs to develop agriculture, industries, self-sufficiency, that's not going to change. And that's what's being the missed opportunity. Everyone agrees in the opposition to get rid of Maduro, but no one is agreeing on who's going to replace him, and no one's agreeing on what kind of economic policy is going to follow. Because I can guarantee you, those people who have been empowered in the Chavez era are not going away.
Yeah, and it's not to say that just because the United States helps you out of this situation, they are not then going to put more pressure on your economy to benefit the United States. I mean, let's face it, they're going to take care of themselves. All right, final question. Here's something I'm very curious about. How in the heck did Maduro win this last election when everything I saw said that 80% of the people were not in favor of him? Did it seem to you like the opposition missed an opportunity there to get him out? Cleanly,
the
fairly?
opposition has had the opposition has been, in some cases, its own worst enemy. In 2005, they did not participate in the National Assembly elections, giving the National Assembly to all of the Chavistas. Here again, when they had an opportunity last year, they opted to boycott. Only one person in the opposition ran a campaign, that is Henry Falcón. I personally think if they had unified forces and mobilized population, instead of simply arguing fraud beforehand, they would have participated. They could have challenged Maduro, and if there was fraud, they would have had the evidence. But instead, they opted to boycott and present Maduro with a fait accompli.
That is an amazing comment you just made that maybe answers a lot of questions that people have had about this. You're a great guest. Miguel Tinker Salas, thank you, sir, for being with us, Professor. We certainly appreciate it.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.